like to welcome everybody to the Virtual Sages 2020, thanks to the COVID pandemic. I was asked to talk originally about academics and private practice and how those two can be matched together and if it's possible. So this is the community forum, and I'd like to thank the selection committee for asking me back. I had the privilege of speaking last year also, and I'm elected not to put myself on video. I'll just be showing my slides today. First of all, I have nothing to disclose. If anybody's got anything that they'd like to share with me or hire me or put me on retainer, that would be great. Otherwise, I have nothing to disclose, except that I'm in private practice and I have been for the last 14 years. This is a picture of me, and for those of you that haven't met me, and this is my very own one. I'm sorry. Well, no, actually, that's one of the things I miss most about SAGES, and then one of the things that's been hardest about this pandemic is the lack of contact with my peers. And SAGES has done a great job with their Facebook groups, such as the SAGES Foregut Mastery and Bariatric Mastery, which I've really very much enjoyed. And if you guys haven't checked those out, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and look at those. They're a great way to meet with your peers, to ask clinical questions and sort of get real-time answers. Plus, if you're like me and you're in private practice, it can be a little lonely to be separated from people that have the same interest in foregut or bariatrics. So that has been really helpful for me. So I'll talk about that a little bit later because I think that, especially in the days of the pandemic, the online or social media aspect of surgery is going to become more and more important. So my objectives today are to talk about academic endeavors in private practice and how you can get involved in academics kind of no matter where you are. So a little bit about me. This is my office here. I'm in El Paso, Texas, sort of considered an underserved area, but I don't really feel overworked really that much at any time. I own my own office. I bought this building. I'm very proud of it. That's why I showed these pictures here. I love the afternoon sun coming in. And it makes it feel a little bit like home. I've been in this building for about 10 years. I entered private practice about 14 years ago. Now, I do have a colleague for coverage. He's a general surgeon, but he's a very good laparoscopic and MIS surgeon also. We don't have a money relationship. We have a handshake, and every other weekend I'm on. Now, that does get a little bit tiresome to work that much and only have 4 days off a month, but it's very worked out very well for us, and we both like to travel. I like to go to meetings. He likes to just travel, and we both get an adequate amount of time off without the other one really complaining that much. We try to not leave much in the hospital for each other, but I'm comfortable with him taking my patients back and vice versa. So as far as my academics, I did enter a relationship with Texas Tech University 5 years ago, and I do get clerkship students every day. So they're third-year clerkship students. They're a joy to work with. They kind of keep you young. And then I get the residents about 7 to 8 months out of the year because I also take residents from the Army Hospital here in El Paso called William Beaumont Army Medical Center. So I have residents a fair amount of the time. It is possible to publish in private practice, and these are the projects that I've published since I started in private practice. Now, a lot of this, a lion's share of this is actually in the last 2 or 3 years as my relationship with Texas Tech has blossomed, and I've been able to have access to their statisticians and their Office of Faculty Development, and they've been very, very helpful. But this is really not to just kind of show off, but really to kind of establish my bona fides that I do feel like I have something to add about this subject since I'm pretty well published at this point. Now, private practice can be a little intimidating, and sometimes you get the idea that you're John Wayne, you're the cowboy, you're out there shooting from the hip. Or even better yet, maybe a samurai, a masterless samurai, a ronin, and I'm in solo private practice, so I actually truly have no master other than my patients. But really, when you get into private practice, it's a little more like this, kind of lonely, by yourself. It's kind of desolate. Sometimes you feel like you're the last man standing after everybody else has gotten snapped up by the hospitals. So there are a lot of challenges in private practice, and I've found that one of the main challenges is essentially a loneliness, which is maybe hard to conceive of when you're a resident or when you're a fellow, because you're always surrounded by a team that usually includes your attending, a fellow, the residents, and probably some medical students. You feel like it might be like that all the time, but even my friends that have gone into private practice with big groups have found that that's not necessarily so. In fact, it isn't necessarily true that your partners will be your friends or be there for you as a support mechanism. So not only is it somewhat personally lonely because you're working all the time and you're not really surrounded by your peers. I mean, there's general surgeons in my community that I talk to and we share cases with and things like that. And the guy I was covered with, he's certainly somebody that helps with that. But you feel like you're cut off from that team approach that you had when you were a resident or a fellow. So you're disconnected, not part of the team anymore. And I think that this is one of the things that can lead to burnout at a pretty high rate. And I do have struggles with burnout myself. So how do you deal with that and those issues? Well, I would suggest that reading and staying up professionally is one way to do that. Now, personally, there's other ways to deal with this, and I'm not really going to address those. I think you need to have a vibrant family life. I don't think you should give up too much time with your kids or the things that you love yourself. Now, when you're building your practice, that's going to happen just kind of naturally, but try to minimize that. But as far as professionally, I think by reading and staying abreast of the literature, I think that's the key to start to deal with this sort of professional loneliness. You have to engage, and I think you have to give back. Now, engagement can take many different forms. It could be in the forms of locally engaging with some of your local medical groups, such as maybe your county medical society, maybe medical staff at your hospital. It could also mean that you engage on a national level with things like SAGES or the ASMBS or whatever your specialty is. And giving back, I think, would be the same thing. You can join certainly the committees in your own hospital, the leadership committees, and you can certainly join and be as engaged as you want with the SAGES. I'm on 2 committees right now, and I'm on some committees with the ASMBS. And I think also when you look at giving back, you can look at training others also. Now, continuing education should go on throughout your professional career, and that's not just CME. And when I say read, I think what you should do is you should probably pick 2 to 3 journals that are in your interest area. Now, for me, that's bariatrics and foregut, so I'm generally going to read surgical endoscopy, obesity surgery, and surgery for obesity and related diseases. If you're a society member, these journals are free to you, and you have access online. In fact, I'm on the publications committee for surgical endoscopy, and there's only 60 print journals that are sent out a month, which I'm one of them. I kind of like to hold the journal in my hand and page through it, but they'll send you the table of contents for all those journals as part of your membership fee. So it's a good resource. Now, if you don't join these memberships, but you have some sort of partial academic appointment, then often you'll have free access to whatever the library of that medical school has, and that's pretty much everything. But it's important that just because you're not in a teaching position as an attending physician training residents and students, it's important that you still think and that you're critical of the literature, that you read the literature, that you interpret it, and your opinions and thoughts are very important. So I would encourage you to question everything. So the engagement, again, pick an area of interest. It can be a little bit pricey, but I think it's very rewarding. And again, this pandemic has made me kind of reflect about how much that I enjoyed traveling and meeting my peers on a national level. It was pricey. I've noticed that my income actually has gone up a little bit during this time period because my case volume hasn't dropped that much. But I think that the actual increase in my income is my lack of travel, because as a private practitioner, I foot the bill myself. Now, there's a little bit of a break there because essentially it's a pre-tax dollar. So it's like I'm getting everything for about a 35% discount when I travel. But you've got to be careful, use a business credit card, make sure that you separate what is a tax expense to what's not. Now, what would be a tax expense would be the meeting price of the meeting, the hotel room, and the travel. Meals can be, alcohol certainly is not. So the other thing about the meetings I think that's important is don't just show up and sign in. Um, Pay attention, go to the meetings, look through the syllabus so that you can pick your day out as to what you want to get out of it. I do like the American College of Surgeons. It's a little big and overwhelming, but they certainly have a plethora of things that you can choose from, and you have to, that's a conference where you really have to plan what you're going to see. With SAGES, things don't overlap as much, but again, I think what you need to find is you need to find your area of interest, and then go to the meeting. Don't just go there to party or not show up. And again, question everything. You see something that's new to you, talk to the people that are giving the presentation. They're very approachable. Every time I've had a question or a clinical concern, or maybe I want to pick somebody's brain that's a famous expert at this problem, and I have a patient like that back home, I've never had somebody not make the time to talk to me in between conferences. Now, sometimes they're rushed, and you'll get that feel from them, but they've, without fail, have been very polite. And these are people that have big names, like Michelle Gagne, Aurora Pryor, who's the current president of SAGES, and she's doing such an awesome job right now, despite this crazy curveball that we all got thrown. Lee Swanstrom, who I consider one of my mentors. I spent a little time with my residency with him in Portland, Oregon. And Calvin Higa, who I've only met at certain meetings or industry-sponsored events, but every one of these I've gone up to cold turkey, talked to them about clinical problems or research problems, and I've never had one of them say, I'm too busy for you, or you're not important enough for me to talk to. And I think that's one of the great things about SAGES specifically. You stay in touch with your mentors from your residency or your fellowship. Eric Wilson is the guy on the screen right, who runs the Minimally Invasive Fellowship at University of Texas at Houston, where I did my fellowship. To this day, I talk to him a couple times a year, certainly at meetings, but I'll call him about clinical problems or conundrums. And Sherman Yu was my co-fellow that year, and I've kept in touch with him, and I consider him a very good friend and even a mentor. These are people that I know I can turn to if I have a question or a clinical concern, and I know that they'll give me their best advice. As far as giving back, participate again in the meeting. And I think social media is the new way to give back. I don't know, maybe some of you have seen my videos. I like to video edit. It's a great hobby of mine. I do it both professionally and personally with the family. But I think it's now a very important way of educating or to share ideas or to collaborate. Now, if you are interested in giving back in an educational standpoint, you just approach your local medical school residency. I'm not even sure how I got involved with Texas Tech. I did graduate from Texas Tech, but I didn't do my residency there. But when I came back home, I guess I got an email once, kind of cold turkey, and just started having students come over. And it's been something that keeps you very young. So it's a community faculty position. They don't pay you for it, but I have access to the university resources. And the students, I think, do keep you young. Now, residents age you, I think. There's no doubt about that. But it's been a very rewarding thing in my life. Well, how do you start research if you're interested? Where would you start? You don't need a research department. In fact, I continue to publish 1 or 2 publications a year the entire time I've been in private practice, despite only having this relationship with Texas Tech and the university for the last 5 years. Now, these were mainly in the form of case reports. I did a lot of posters at meetings. It's getting harder and harder to publish a case report, but it's not impossible. And I think if that's your interest, I think case reports are a very valuable portion of literature. I think that sometimes one of the best things that I used to like to do at these meetings was to go through the poster hall. We don't have that anymore. These organizations have made it very hard for you to find posters. But I used to love to wander through that and just see what was out there, because you never know what you're going to encounter in the operating room. And seeing something one time on a poster may give you that help you need in the middle of the night. Now, you do have to take into account patient privacy. It's a must. You've got to de-identify everything. You should take it through your IRB. If you're in a private practice situation, you can run it by the hospital. They usually have a risk manager, or they might even have an IRB, which is essentially a lawyer. But you'll need to do your city training, and you need to use some common sense for this. You need to define the goal or question of your research. If you can't succinctly define it, you're going to get nowhere with your research. And there has to be practical considerations. Don't choose an animal model. choose something common. Don't really choose something unusual. Keep up with the literature so you know, and make sure that you do a good literature search before you really ask this question, because if it's been done 15 times, you're probably not going to add anything to it. Do you need a statistical analysis? How far do you want it to go? Is it retrospective or prospective? Again, make sure it's doable. It's easy to come up with an idea, but it can be hard to practically implement it. Now, databases are something that I found that have been very useful for me because I have access to them through the university, so they're free there. But the better databases do cost a little bit of money, so you'd have to come up with a grant. And if you're going to do a database study, you do need the support of a statistician. There's no way around that. So maybe your goal isn't publication. It doesn't have to be. I think when you look at Instagram and Facebook, you can really see where we're going with this in the future. And in fact, I think you could change it from publish to perish to post or perish. And some of these groups are massive. Physician Moms Group has 71,000 women who are just like you. That's from their website. My wife's a member of this, and she constantly is on this. In fact, they've gotten to the point where they now have meetings. So that's become a very important platform. There's the closed groups I talked about, such as the International Bariatric Club, SAGE's Foregut Mastery, Robotics Bariatric Collaboration. And remember to keep it campy. I mean, this isn't a place for you to criticize people. People that put themselves out there with a video or with a clinical problem are not doing that so that you can bring them down. And this isn't a malignant residency. This is a forum for people to try to help each other. And it may not be the way you would have done it, but I think that it needs to be on a very professional level. And in fact, I've developed some great Facebook friends from these models. Now, the old model of the brick and mortar medical school is essentially dead. In fact, it seems like all my students only learn up to date, which I consider for mid-levels. But I think that what we need to do is just go to the online model of journals, Facebook groups, or social media. So I kind of went a little over my allotted 15 minutes, but if anybody has any questions, please email me or, Instagram me, or just become my Instagram follower. My son has 500 follows and he's 18 years old and I'm trying to beat him. So I figured that SAGES would get me over that bump, but then of course it got canceled. Well, I hope everybody's staying safe during the pandemic. I hope that you'll remain to stay safe, and I hope to see everyone next year in person. Thank you for your time.